Welcome back. Political strategist time. Isn't it exciting? Democratic strategist Ameshia Cross, Republican strategist, former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Marc Short. All right, folks, I told you we would continue to update you on the Graham Platner story. Here is another update from Ruben Gallego. We have a graphic. Please bring it up, control room. The allegations against Graham Platner are troubling and deeply serious. I am rescinding my endorsement. Democratic Senator from Arizona, Ruben Gallego. So, Ameshia, this looks like it's over.
Yeah, I think that the statement that was released by Platner earlier kind of opened the door to it possibly being over. He only has a short, I think it's what, the 15th or the 16th?
13th.
That he has, the 13th, okay, shorter than that he has to make that decision. But
whenever a politician talks about exploring the path forward, there's no path forward.
The other
Do we agree on that as professionals?
Yeah. He's had multiple allegations before, but none of them rose to the extent of an accusation of rape.
And as you know,
that's the same thing that happened with Eric Swalwell. Once you get to that, it's about to be over.
And as you know, lots of Democrats who had endorsed with him had said privately, that's the line. Mm-hmm. And if it's serious and credible, I'm not going to be there. Marc, you're shaking your head.
Well, the Nazi tattoo is okay.
Go ahead.
The trafficking on apps that you're basically sex trafficking young girls was okay. The initial sexual allegations were okay, but we drew the line there. Mm-hmm. I mean, what is the line, really? So I think you're seeing a lot of Democrats walk back, but they sure were comfortable with a lot of things.
Do you think this fundamentally alters, or how so does it fundamentally alter that Senate race?
I think dramatically.
Susan Collins is now the odds-on favorite.
I would think so. Look, I always thought that she was, because people always discount.
What if Janet Mills comes back in? Which she could. Sitting governor, two-term elected?
I think that probably where you are in this moment is an anti-establishment moment. I don't know that Janet Mills really fills that void to say, hey, I'm somehow an outsider here.
Ameshia?
Yeah, I think that Marc's right on that. At this point, and we know that, Democrats, the establishment wanted a more moderate candidate anyway. Clearly, that's not what Democratic voters wanted. So at this point, if he is to step down, which I think that he will, it is going to be somebody who the voters did not choose. It is going to be somebody who is somebody who they, it may be her, may not be her, but anybody who comes up is somebody who they did not roundly choose themselves. That was part of the argument that several Democrats had with Kamala Harris. At the end of the day, folks like to know that they chose somebody in the primary. And unfortunately, this information did not come out before votes were cast. So now they're going to be stuck in a very tough position. And it could depress the Democratic vote entirely.
Before the Graham Platner news broke via Politico, we would have started our conversation about something else that happened over the weekend with Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out of the Senate Democratic primary in Michigan and did so with a statement. Let's run that.
I haven't been shy about calling for new leadership and a better Democratic Party. I mean it. The energy is there. People are crying out for change. Whoever wins this primary on August 4th will have my full support.
It was a three-way race. Now it's two. How do you assess it?
Well, McMorrow started very strong, and I think that midway through her campaign, she listened to a whole bunch of D.C. consultants who took her in the wrong direction. She tried to be everything to everybody and became nothing to no one. So you had a lane that she started in that I think was more progressive, that was more leaning towards putting the building back together.
Dr. Abdul El-Sayed now has that lane.
And then he grabbed it. And it was over. Her fundraising never really eclipsed to where it needed to be. And at that point, it kind of just became mute. She honestly, in my estimation, she should have dropped out weeks ago because there was no real path forward.
It's now Haley Stevens and Dr. El-Sayed. How do you assess it?
El-Sayed is likely going to be the Democratic nominee. I don't see an avenue where he is not at this point. He has shown himself to not only be formidable, but to also draw that line between the buzzword of the day as people are focusing in on affordability, but also the frustration that many folks have in Michigan and across the country about the consistent spending on the war in Iran, as well as the ongoing war in Palestine.
And Marc Short, you know that Mike Rogers is the Republican nominee in Michigan, ran, nearly won. Yeah. How do you assess the race now?
Look, I think that Republicans in Michigan have had a hard time finding a way to win when Trump is not at the top of the ticket. So I still think it's going to be tough. I think it's a tough climate. But, wow, it's been a really difficult 48 hours for Senate Democrats. And I think that it's clear that they're looking and hoping by getting this candidate out that they'll be rallying the establishment around Stevens. But she's run a pretty miserable, lackluster campaign. So I think that national Democrats are concerned about how progressive they are, particularly with all the rise of the Democrat socialist candidates.
When you look at this midterm, there was a narrative developing about a month ago that most of the wins were favorably behind the backs of Democrats, wherever you were. Do you detect in any way that's shifting?
I still think that the wind is behind Democrats. I think that a midterm is going to be a referendum on the party in power. And when you have, a president in the mid-30s and approval ratings, I think that's really difficult. But having said that, this has been a really bad couple days for Senate Democrats.
And you add to that the Supreme Court decision on independent expenditure money, which is going to net, at least for this cycle, help Republicans.
I think maybe, Major. I'm less convinced on the benefits. I think the reality is that I've always been a proponent that people should be allowed to get what they want as long as it's fully disclosed.
And it's message and environment more than money that determines the outcome in every election.
Yes.
You know that, and I know that both. Ameshia Cross, great stuff. Marc Short, you're always welcome here. Great to have you.